We often think war is decided by the loudest moments, by guns, by heroes, by a single hill taken or lost. But sometimes the real decision happens far from the front line, in a quiet shed, with one man running his hand across cold steel. It's April 1943, 20 miles south of Berlin, at the Kummersdorf Proving Grounds. Germany is deep into a war it cannot stop, with an industry already stretched to its limits. There is no time to restart, no time to rebuild the factories, no second chance to choose a different path. And today, a single American tank-owned machine, one serial number will show them exactly why. The German engineer stands beside the strange, squat shape of an American M4 Sherman. Serial number US a 3,067,641, captured in Tunisia 2 months earlier. The Americans had given it a name painted below the gun barrel in block letters, War Daddy 2. He runs his hand along the hull and feels it immediately, not a flaw in the steel, not a crack in the weld. Something else, something wrong with everything he has been told about American industry. The welds are the first shock. They are not rough or hurried. They are smooth, even almost beautiful in their uniformiteclean beads laid down by machines, not by master craftsmen. He has spent 3 weeks inside this tank, cataloging every component for German high command. He is supposed to find weaknesses, draft firing tables, diagram exact points of penetration for German guns. Instead, everywhere he looks, this American tank keeps refusing to fail. He doesn't know it yet, but the story of War Daddy 2 does not begin in this quiet yard south of Berlin. It begins under a different sun with different men on a day when everything for the Americans is going wrong. 8 weeks earlier, it is 22 February 1943 in Tunisia, 8 days after the Battle of Sidi Bou Zid begins. The 1st Armored Division is reeling. German panzers have smashed into American lines and driven them back toward Kasserine Pass. Columns of use, vehicles stream westward in dust and confusion, radios overloaded, orders changing by the hour. In the middle of that chaos, one tank from Company, 3rd Battalion, 1st Armored Regiment, fights and falls back with the rest. War Daddy 2, we do not know exactly why its crew abandons it. Maybe they run out of fuel at the wrong moment. Maybe a shell shatters a track link and strands them under threat of encirclement. The records are silent on the detail that matters most to them. What the records do say is simple. When German recovery teams reach the Sherman, it is intact. No burn, doubt wreck. No twisted turret, just a fully formed machine left behind in haste. A German mechanic swings himself down onto the engine deck, ducks inside, checks a few unfamiliar levers and gauges. He hits the starter. The engine catches immediately. Unlike most captured tanks, this one does not need coaxing. No hours of repair, no parts stolen from other machines. The Sherman starts on the first try. Over the next 4.5 days, German crews drive War Daddy 2 more than 2 miles across the Tunisian desert to Tunis. Heat, dust, endless vibration, no breakdowns, no final drive failures, no catastrophic engine fires. It just runs. Then the Americans' lost tank is rolled onto a ship, lashed down, and sent north away from the desert and into the heart of the Reich. High Command wants answers, and they want them from their best people. So the tank that once fought for the 1st Armored Division is about to fight a different kind of battle in a different kind of war. Back to April 1943, Kummersdorf, the proving grounds stretch across flat, sandy soil south of Berlin. This place is the cradle of German weapons dreams. Rockets, artillery, experimental vehicles, Reich's most advanced ideas have passed through here, evaluated, refined, or quietly killed. Here in 1941, engineers had examined captured Soviet T-34s and, shocked by what they found, helped shape the design of the Panther tank as Germany's answer. Now, for the first time, they stand around an American medium tank. Expectations are low. German intelligence has already judged the Sherman. Mass-produced, inferior, thin armor, weak gun, built by a country that has never fought a real modern tank war. The engineers approach like artisans inspecting a cheap counterfeit, pens ready to write a scathing report that will reassure their superiors. They start with what they understand best, armor, tape measures slap softly against steel, angles are checked and rechecked. They scribe chalk lines, then stencil numbers directly onto the hull in white paint. 51 millimeters on the front hull. 38 millimeters on the sides, adequate but hardly impressive. One of them does the quick mental math. A Tiger's 88mm gun can punch straight through this at over a mile. On paper, that part of the evaluation is comforting. This, at least, matches what they have been told. Then they open the engine compartment. The rear deck plates swing up with a solid, simple hinge. No complicated contortions needed, no maze of interlocking panels. The Continental R975 radial engine sits deep in the hull, a compact multi-cylinder mass of metal that looks more like it belongs in an aircraft than in a tank. Because that is exactly what it is, an aircraft engine adapted by the Americans for armored warfare. 400 horsepower air-cooled, designed to remain reliable for long hours at altitude where no mechanic can reach it. The German engineer notes the figures: 30 tons of tank, 400 horsepower. 13 horsepower per ton. He thinks of the Panther not far away on these same grounds, 45 tons of armor and steel, driven by a 700 horsepower WWII, 130, 15.5 horsepower per ton. On paper, not much more thrust per ton than this smaller American. But power is not what stops him. Any great industrial nation can make a powerful engine. He lifts another panel, and that is when it truly starts to unsettle him. Everything is accessible: oil filters, spark plugs, major components, all within easy reach through large, straightforward hatches. No need to contort a mechanic's body into hidden corners. No need for specialized lifting rigs just to get at simple parts. He imagines a young, barely trained American mechanic in a muddy field somewhere. A few spanners, basic instructions, and he can keep this engine running indefinitely. He thinks about German tanks, about how the Maybach engines demand factory-trained specialists even for routine work, about known cooling problems in the WWII that lead to engine fires, about replacing one, how it usually means craning the entire unit out and burning a full day of work with skilled hands that Germany does not have in endless supply. The Americans, he realizes, have built a tank that can be serviced in the field by almost anyone. The Germans have built tanks that keep trying to go home. He writes it all down, his pen scratching across forms destined for offices that do not want to read what he is finding. They start the power train. He braces himself, expecting the harsh mechanical scream of spur gears grinding under load sound he has heard 100 times when German transmissions spin up on a test stand. But the Sherman doesn't scream, it hums. A deep, smooth mechanical note runs through the hull. He feels it more than he hears it. His brow furrows. He calls his colleagues over. They lean closer, listening. The difference is unmistakable. Later, with panels off and components exposed, they understand why. The Sherman's transmission uses herringbone gear stubble helical teeth, precisely machined so each tooth meshes gently into the next. Under load, they distribute force smoothly, quietly. These are not crude components. They are the kind of gears designed to last thousands of miles. German tanks, by contrast, use spur gears, straight, cut teeth, cheaper and faster to manufacture. Harsher, noisier, far more vulnerable to wear when a 45-ton tank grinds across broken ground. The engineer knows the reason immediately, and it has nothing to do with ignorance. Herringbone gears demand complex machine tools and high precision. They eat cutting tools made of tungsten carbide, of the strategic materials Germany can no longer afford to waste. Allied blockades, collapsing supply chains, tungsten carbide has become precious. So German factories have gone back to spur gears, trading long-term durability for shorter production times and less wear on rare tooling. He looks at the American transmission, runs a hand over its smooth casing, and notes the projected service life, 30 miles between overhauls. Then he thinks of the Panther's final drives, living under the crushing loads of a heavy frontal armor package. On average, they last about 100 miles in real field conditions, not 100,100. A Sherman, he realizes, can drive from Normandy to Berlin under its own power. A Panther risks breaking itself just getting from the rail yard to the front. The more they examine, the worse it gets for Germany. Then they reach the gun. The 75mm main gun, by reputation, is nothing special. German officers have already dismissed it as weak compared to their high-velocity 75s and 88s, but bolted to the gun's mounting is a small, boxy device with wires snaking away from it, disappearing into the turret. They track the cables to a compact gyroscope near the gunner's position, a stabilizer. The Americans have put a gyroscopic gun stabilization system into a mass-produced tank. One of the engineers stares at it in disbelief. They have talked about this before in German design teams. They have run bench tests, conducted experiments, but they have never managed to make such a system small and rugged enough for regular tank use. The tolerances are unforgiving, the precision demanded by such gyros is high. Their industry, already strained, has never been able to push it into widespread production. They power up the system, watch the gyro spin, feel the resistive tug as the stabilizer tries to keep the gun steady in one axis. It is not perfect, it only stabilizes in the vertical plane. This is not modern fire accurately on the move at full speed technology, but it does something almost as deadly. It keeps the gun roughly on target while the tank is moving, so that when the driver halts, even for a moment, the gunner only needs a second or two to fine-tune and fire. German tanks, with their heavy suspensions and uncompensated recoil, often need 10 to 15 seconds to settle completely before an accurate shot can be made. In a tank duel, the first accurate shot tends to decide who lives and who burns. The engineer runs the calculation in his head. The Sherman can get that first accurate shot off seconds after stopping. The German tank might still be bouncing. They strip the stabilizer, measure every component, sketch the servo motors and gyro assemblies. They calculate what it would take to copy it. The answer, when it emerges in their notes, is stark. They cannot, not with the precision machine tools they have, not with the materials available to them in 1943, not at the scale required to fit one in every tank that rolls off a German line. And still he senses they have not yet uncovered the worst part, because the greatest danger inside War Daddy 2 is not a gun or an engine or a gear. It is an idea hidden in every bolt and bearing, a way of thinking about war that his country cannot match. Weeks pass, reports pile up. Diagrams and tables are copied and carried upward through the bureaucracy, trimmed and summarized at each level. Yet in the minds of many generals, the picture of the Sherman remains what it always was, an inferior mass-produced enemy machine. So in June 1943, War Daddy 2 leaves Kummersdorf. It is moved to another testing ground, Hillersleben. This time, the goal is not quiet evaluation. It is spectacle. Hillersleben's broad firing ranges and demonstration areas are prepared for a show, a carefully arranged trial for the men who make the decisions that matter most. Senior officers from across the WWII arrive. Generals who command armored formations, who control funding and priorities, who decide whether the Reich keeps building Tigers and Panther pursues another path. They are not here to read technical tables. They are here to see a contest. A hill climb is prepared, a steep 30-degree slope of loose sand. It is a brutal test of traction and raw power, chosen carefully to highlight the strengths of German designs. The Panther goes first. Its wide tracks bite into the sand. The big Maybach roars, a hard, confident bellow of power. The hull surges upward. No hesitation, no slide. It crests the slope almost effortlessly. The generals nod, some smiling. Their thoroughbred warhorse has performed exactly as advertised. Then it is War Daddy 2's turn. The Sherman rolls up to the base of the hill. Its tracks are narrower, fitted with rubber blocks meant for long-distance road marches and mixed terrain, not deep, dry sand. The driver answers the signal and opens the throttle. The engine growls, building into a strained whine as the tank noses up the incline. For a moment, it seems to bite. Then the tracks start to spin. Sand sprays backward. The tank creeps, loses purchase. Its momentum falters, gravity begins to win. War Daddy 2 slides backward, defeated by the slope. From the viewing stand, German generals applaud. Their narrative is confirmed. The Panther has climbed, the Sherman has failed. They see victory in a single dramatic moment on a single sandy hill. Down below, the engineers who have lived inside War Daddy 2 for weeks exchange glances that are anything but triumphant. They know what the demonstration does not show. Yes, the Panther has won this sprint, but they also know its final drives are fragile, its cooling system temperamental, its maintenance demanding. They know that without rail cars and workshops, the Panther bleeds itself to death over distance. They also know that War Daddy Tooth has same Sherman now sliding on loose sand in front of their commanderships, already driven more than 2 miles across Tunisian desert under German control. After having fought in American hands before that, no final drive change, no catastrophic breakdowns, just fuel, oil, and routine care. They watch their generals cheer and feel a quiet, spreading dread because the test has validated all the wrong instincts. The hill at Hillersleben has just convinced the people who matter most to keep building hyper-performance thoroughbreds instead of reliable workhorses. Up on the stand, no one wants to hear that the failure on this one hill means nothing compared to the Sherman's success in simply getting here. The engineer who first ran his hand along War Daddy Two's hull understands what is being lost in that applause. But in this system, his voice is a technical note buried under layers of pride and ideology, and outside the wire, American factories are already spinning up for a very different kind of war. And then word of this American tank, and the unsettling reports from Kummersdorf, reaches a man whose signature decides what Germany builds and what it does not. Albert Speer, Reich Minister of Armaments, every tank, every aircraft, every submarine drawn from German industry ultimately passes through his ledger. He has a reputation, even among his enemies, for ruthless efficiency. In 1942, he has already tripled German weapons output by reorganizing production, cutting waste, and forcing factories into line. He believes, perhaps still, that German engineering, properly managed, can outproduce the Allies. Now he comes to see War Daddy 2 for himself. Cameras click as Speer walks slowly around the Sherman, hands behind his back, listening to the engineers who have lived with this machine for weeks. They show him the welds, the gears, the engine access panels that swing open easily, the stabilizer bolted to the 75mm gun. He pauses often, takes notes, asks questions. He reads technical reports. He hears how, in tests and in captured documentation from Italy, the Sherman's cross-country mobility is praised again and again. How American tanks climb hills and mountains that German experts on paper had declared inaccessible to armor. He studies the power-to-weight calculations. He traces a finger across charts comparing reliability, road range, engine life. On level ground, the Sherman's power-to-weight ratio gives it mobility that rivals or exceeds German designs. In rough country, with its simpler, more forgiving mechanics, it keeps moving where heavier cats falter. But gradually, as he moves around War Daddy 2 and flips through more pages, Speer realizes the problem is not just technical. It is philosophical. Germany is building complex, hyper-performance machines that must be shuttled to the front by rail, like racehorses delivered in padded cars. They are deadly when they arrive, but always at the mercy of tracks, fuel wagons, and workshops. America is building a mobile force that can drive itself to the front line. The Sherman is not just a tank. It is a statement of priorities, reliability, maintainability, mass production. German design teams have chased something else, technical superiority, even when it means fragility. Perfect guns, thick armor, sophisticated optics, and complex machinery, each machine an individual masterpiece, each more difficult to maintain and replace. Standing beside War Daddy 2, listening to his own engineers describe an engine any basic mechanic can service, a transmission that can last the life of the tank, Speer understands something that will haunt him for the rest of his life. No amount of German engineering genius can overcome a logistical philosophy that is simply better suited to total war. He signs papers, he files the reports, he does what he can to rationalize production, but the broad direction's devotion to heavy, complex designs like the Tiger and Panther remains. Because changing that would mean admitting that the enemy's philosophy is superior, and in Hitler's Reich, that kind of truth has nowhere to go. The men who feel the consequences of that choice are not ministers in Berlin. They are tank crews. Alfred Rubbel commands a Tiger I in Schwer Panzerabteilung 503, the 503rd Heavy Panzer Battalion. He is not a theoretician. He is a man who lives and kills in steel. By the time his war ends, Rubbel will be an ace with 57 confirmed kills. He knows exactly what German heavy tanks can do when they work, and exactly how often they don't. His unit uses captured Shermans as recovery and supply vehicles. That detail alone tells its own story. When he later compares them, his words are chilling in their simplicity. The Sherman, he says, is like a reliable civilian car. You push the button and it starts. With the Tiger, there is always a procedure. Check the fluids, warm up the engine carefully, monitor the transmission, listen for anything that sounds wrong, because if it goes wrong out there, you might not get another chance to move. The Sherman, in his memory, just works. German crews love their Tigers and Panthers when they are running. The power, the feeling of invulnerability behind thick armor, the way their big guns tear through enemy tanks at ranges the Allies struggle to match. But that love is always conditional, always shadowed by the knowledge that the machine under them is fragile in the one dimension that matters most, availability. They are race engines in a world that increasingly demands tractors. By 1944, the numbers on paper finally start to reflect what crews like Rubble already sense in their bones. German armored divisions report operational readiness rates of 35 to 45%. On any given day, more than half the tanks in a division are not available for combat. They are sidelined by breakdowns, waiting for parts, waiting for mechanics who are already overworked. In the same period, American armored units keep their readiness above 85%. When the Americans plan an offensive, they have tanks that actually show up to fight. The numbers speak a language that propaganda cannot drown out forever, even if it tries. Reliability is not glorious. It doesn't make for stirring poster art, but it is always there in the background, deciding who can attack, who can defend, and who can do nothing but watch the front line move without them. Then comes Normandy. In the bocage on the hedgerow-choked lanes of France, German tank crews fight with everything they have. Panthers and Tigers ambush columns of Shermans from concealed positions, their guns slicing through American armor at terrifying ranges. Kill ratios on individual engagements are often brutal. A single Tiger can knock out multiple Shermans in quick succession. On the surface, it looks like proof of the German bet on technical superiority. But behind the front line, another battle plays out in silence. As the German retreat from Normandy turns chaotic, crews are forced to abandon their Panthers again, and again not because of enemy fire, but because their own machines give up. Roughly half of all Panthers left behind in the withdrawal are destroyed not by Allied gunners, but by their own crews scuttled after mechanical failure. Transmissions, final drives, engines, the steel thoroughbreds cannot keep up with the demands of retreat, of constant movement, of rough roads under combat loads. Imagine the frustration of a Panther crew. You sit behind the thickest armor on the battlefield. You control one of the most powerful tank guns of the war. You know, because you've seen it, that frontally at range you outclass almost anything the enemy can show you. But today you're standing on the side of a French road, watching coolant steam or transmission smoke drift out of your own engine deck. You hear the distant thunder of artillery, you smell the oil, you stack charges in your own turret ring to make sure your precious machine cannot be captured. And then, one after another, you watch columns of inferior Shermans roll past, dust clouds trailing behind them, heading farther west or east o' wind ground you can no longer contest. You did not lose because you were outfought. You lost because you could not even get to the fight. The statistics from the Ardennes at the end of 1944 are worse. In the Battle of the Bulge, German commanders throw their remaining heavy armor into one last desperate offensive through snow and forest. The Tiger Ayahs and Panthers that do reach the front are terrifying to face, but by late 1944, 60 to 70% of German heavy tank losses are non-combat. Not enemy shells, not bazookas, not Allied aircraft, fuel shortages and breakdowns. Vehicles are abandoned, blown up by their own crews, or simply left immobilized as fuel convoys fail to arrive and engines go dry. The long shadow of logistics off herringbone gears they cannot build, of transmissions that cannot survive, of fuel that no longer arrives in time falls over the last German offensives. At Kummersdorf, back in April 1943, the engineers had seen all this coming in the raw data. They had tried to look past the showy hill climb at Hillersleben, past the one-off demonstration that made the Panther look invincible and the Sherman clumsy. They had focused instead on what actually matters in a long war: mean time between failure, ease of maintenance. Cross-country availability, the ability of a conscript mechanic, not a master craftsman, to keep the machine alive. They had documented every quiet advantage the Sherman offered. They wrote reports explaining in calm equations and clear tables exactly why American mass production would win the logistics war. Higher readiness, shorter repair times, engines and transmissions that survived not just one battle, but campaign after campaign. But the applause on that sandy slope at Hillersleben had drowned all of it out. The generals had watched the Sherman slide backward and walked away satisfied that German engineering remained supreme. They did not want to hear that the hill was a trick question and that the real test was endurance. And without their attention, the engineers' warnings stay where so many technical truths stay in wartime Germany, in files, in archives, and in the memories of those who saw them ignored. Germany cannot simply copy the American approach, even if its leaders wanted to. The obstacles are not just intellectual. They are material. Herringbone gears like those in the Sherman's transmission require precise, complex machine tools and cutting heads made of tungsten carbide, material Germany is increasingly starved of, thanks to Allied blockades and the loss of access to global markets. Precision electronics, servos, gyroscopes like the stabilizer on War Daddy II demand copper and rare earth elements in quantities that are no longer easy to find. The Reich is being cut off, piece by piece, from the raw materials that make advanced mass production possible. Then there is the culture of production itself. German factories are organized around skilled craftsmen, men who fit components, who polish and adjust and test each machine as if it were a custom-built item. It is a system that produces magnificent one-off weapons, but it does not scale. American factories use interchangeable parts and assembly lines. They design from the start for the idea that no individual worker needs to be a master. The design carries the intelligence, the line carries the volume. Converting German industry from craftsmanship to true mass production would take years of retooling, retraining, rebuilding. Years Germany simply does not have by 1943. And then, towering above all these practical limits, there is ideology. Nazi propaganda insists that German engineering is inherently superior, an expression of supposed Aryan genius. To admit that American mass production methods those of a nation derided as soft, decadent, inexperienced in land war are actually better suited to modern conflict would be to undermine the regime's own myth. So the Reich stays on its chosen path. It keeps building tigers and panthers, machines that are awe-inspiring on the test stand and terrifying when they work in battle, but that spend too much of their lives broken. They are technical marvels. They are increasingly strategically irrelevant. Meanwhile, across the ocean, American factories do something almost no one in Berlin wants to confront head-on. They keep printing tanks. By the end of the war, the United States will build 324 Sherman tanks. Germany in the same period will produce around 60 Panthers and 347 Tigers. For medium tanks alone, the production ratio sits at nearly 8-1. And those American tanks do not just exist on paper. They run, they arrive, they drive under their own power to the front. They break down less often, and when they do, they come back more quickly. On the tactical level, a Tiger can still be a nightmare. In a single engagement with a skilled crew and good position, it can destroy 5 Shermans, sometimes more. Gun, armor, optics in that small stage, in that brief window of time, German engineering can still impose a terrible asymmetry. But war is not fought in isolated duels. Tomorrow, there will be 6 more Shermans rolling forward. And that Tiger, if it still exists at all, might be sitting behind the lines with its transmission torn open, waiting for a part that will not arrive for 3 weeks, if it arrives at all. The mathematics are brutal. German tankers achieve kill ratios that would have decided any earlier war. In many other conflicts, such numbers would have meant victory, but this war is not about kill ratios. It is about logistics. It is about whose machines start in the morning, whose engines turn over when the offensive begins, whose transmissions survive the retreat as well as the advance. Back at Kummersdorf, in memory and in sparse surviving photos, War Daddy II stands as a quiet witness to that truth. To the German engineers who first took it apart, it has already delivered its verdict by April 1943, A tank that starts when you push the button, a transmission that can live as long as the hull, an engine that any line mechanic can service with basic tools. They see in its hatches and in its gears a future they cannot reach. Reliability beats perfection. Availability beats capability. Working beats superior every single time. In the end, War Daddy 2 is just one tank. One vehicle among tens of thousands of Shermans, one hull among millions of tons of steel forged, machined, shipped, and assembled across an ocean. It never fires a shot at Kummersdorf or Hillersleben. It never charges a hill in front of cheering crowds in Berlin. It sits in test bays on sand slopes under the eyes of officers and engineers and quietly tells a story that most of them do not want to hear. The story of how this war is really going to be decided not by the most powerful single gun, not by the thickest single armor plate, not by the most frightening silhouette on a battlefield poster, but by what happens when a crew turns a key, by whether a tank that fought in Tunisia can then be driven 200 miles across a desert by the enemy who captured it, shipped to Europe, stripped, tested, and still keep running. By whether a machine can be trusted to start in rain, snow, mud, and dust, in the hands of a hurried, half-trained mechanic with a box of tools and a manual. German engineers at Kummersdorf and Hillersleben see all this in April and June of 1943. They measure, they calculate, they argue. They understand before most that the Sherman is not an inferior mass tank in the way their own propaganda insists. It is a weapon built around a different set of questions. How do we keep it running? How fast can we build the next one? How easy is it to fix far from home? Those questions do not sound heroic. They do not sound like the stuff of legends. But on the long roads of France in 1944, on frozen Ardennes tracks in late 1944, and across the shattered towns of Germany in 1945, it is those questions and their answers that start to matter more than any single duel. German crews stalk Shermans and knock them out with frightening efficiency, sometimes 5 or more in a day. Yet the next morning, there are always more Shermans, and every day there are fewer Panthers and Tigers that can even make it to the line. By then, the logic that War Daddy 2 exposed in that quiet yard south of Berlin has moved from paper to reality. Looking back years later, Speer writes in his memoirs about the reports praising Shermans in Italy, about American tanks climbing slopes that German experts consider impossible. He remembers the numbers, the readiness rates, the production figures. He understands what War Daddy 2 had shown him when he ran his hand along its armor. You can build a war around masterpieces, or you can build a war around machines that simply work. Germany chooses the first path and cannot leave it. Its engineers are too good at making complicated things. Its factories are too focused on craftsmanship. Its ideology is too committed to the myth of unique, elite superiority. America chooses the second path. It puts reliability over brilliance, maintainability over elegance, production over perfection, and in the brutal arithmetic of total war, that choice is decisive. So when we talk about Tigers and Panthers, about Shermans burning in Normandy and tank aces with long victory counts, there is another story running quietly in parallel. The story of a captured tank with serial number US, a 3,067,641 War Daddy 2, of German engineers in April 1943 at Kummersdorf, tracing the lines of its transmission and realizing it can outlast almost anything they have built. Of a failed hill climb at Hillersleben that convinces generals to keep chasing the wrong ideal. Of Speer walking slowly around the tank, seeing not just steel, but a philosophy he cannot copy in time. War Daddy 2 does not win any medals. It does not earn a place in popular memory like famous battles or famous commanders. But inside its hull, in its quiet gears and accessible engine, is a lesson written in metal. You don't win a war just by building something superior. You win by building something that is there when you need it. A Tiger can destroy 5 Shermans in one engagement. But if the Tiger is broken, out of fuel, or sitting dead on a roadside with its crew packing charges into its turret, those 5 kills do not matter. Another Sherman will roll by, and another, until the war is over. In a way, War Daddy 2 is a mirror. On one side, It reflects German belief in precision, in the masterpiece machine, in the single duel where the better gun and the thicker armor should decide everything. On the other, it reflects an American belief that the real battlefield is the factory floor, the rail yard, the maintenance depot, that the most important number is not kills per tank, but tanks available per day, the tank that starts when you push the button, the transmission that survives the campaign, the engine that any mechanic can keep alive. In that mirror, German engineers in 1943 can already glimpse the end of their war. They can't change it, they can only write it down. And somewhere in a test report in a quiet office in Berlin, a line is typed and filed away, its meaning much larger than the words themselves. Reliability beats perfection. Availability beats capability. Working beats superior every single time. If you've listened this far, think about this. What moment in this story surprised you most? Silent hum of the Sherman's gears, the failed hill climb that misled the generals, or the kill ratios? That didn't matter in the end. Do you think this war was decided more by the constraints, materials, logistics, ideology, or by the choices people made within those limits? If you want more stories that cut beneath the headlines of battles and look at the machines, the decisions, and the unseen math that decided them, let me know which war, which weapon, or which campaign you want to hear about next. Like the video, if this changed how you see World War II. Subscribe if you want to follow more missions like this one, where one forgotten machine can explain an entire war.